them in here and if they need a follow-up. So good morning, my name is Linda Myers. I am your tax collector. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you, by the way. I love it. This is our first, good morning, come on in. This is our first coffee and conversation. And because of that, you lucked out. We have donuts, although it looks like y'all are gonna make us eat them. Today was a big fundraiser from one of our local schools, and about 3 weeks ago, everybody bought a dozen, because that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
Well, they showed up this morning, so we have dozens in there, and I said, well, I know some people that could use a sugar high, perhaps. Eva, did you start us rolling? So the first thing I want to announce is that we are videotaping this. And that's in response to the people who called and said, I can't be there tomorrow, will you do this again? And I said, well, we may do this again, but not anytime soon, because we are going to continue these conversations, but there's some other topics that we're going to cover. So I'm familiar with this because I called recently to Clay County and said, I see where you're doing a workshop, I can't be there, are you going to videotape it? And they said no. And I said, gosh, if you would, all of us could take advantage of that. So we are taping this. So having said that, it's right there. It is looking this way, and now John Chapman, it has your face.
Wonderful.
If you don't want your face on it, just keep looking this way, or sit along the wall. And if you ask a question and afterwards you think, gosh, that was a silly question, we will edit you out. Just come and say, listen, can you edit out that question, ask that question? Because I've asked silly questions, and you go back and you go, oh my God, the whole place say that.
The back of my head is
Who
it.
knows? Just keep
You
your
can ask all
butt.
the children you want.
So having said that, this is our first one. Why did we choose this subject matter? Because, quite honestly, we started doing concealed weapons just a little over 2 years ago. It's not our idea. I've gotten a lot of credit, and we appreciate that, and we're glad to have partnered. But the Department of Agriculture, who is the owner of this process and of the program, was overwhelmed with the requests for CWP, and they were so backlogged. And some of you who were in that backlog, I got mine early in the backlog, and it would take months and months and months and months to get them. And so it got frustrating because people would be calling them, which slows them down. So they looked out at the state, and there are 67 identical, for most part, offices in the state of Florida, and those are our tax collector offices. And we are self-funded in the sense that we earn fees. We don't use tax money to run our operations. So we contract with different agencies. So we signed a contract with the Department of Agriculture. When you're here with Richard, who is our lead person, he's actually working as an agent of the Department of Agriculture, and we earn a fee for every time he works with a successful client. And I say successful, that doesn't mean you got the license, because if you have something in the background that we all know about. But it means that we processed it for the Department of Agriculture, and we earn a fee on that. And everything we do in this office is fee-based. That's why state agencies look at us and say, hey, we can contract with you. We recently, 2 years ago, signed a contract with the Department of Health, because many times we have people walking in and saying, I need a birth certificate for my driver's license. I've lived here 75 years. It's okay, we can print it for you. And so we didn't have to send them somewhere else. Now, having said that, the only 2 places we print them are in the satellites, because it's a long haul to come into the Department of Health and get their birth certificate. For our customers, it's just a mile and a half down the road. So that's why we seem to be the right person or the right organization to do this. At this point in time, there are only about 35 counties that signed up to do that. For a variety of reasons, that's a decision the tax collector did have the opportunity to do or not do. And that's normally when the state agency asks us to do something, we all have the option to do that or not. But we had had many phone calls saying, I hear you might be able to do this. And we responded to those phone calls and said yes. And because of that, we've been doing, I don't even know, we should talk the numbers that we do a lot in that 2.5 years. It's shocking that there was a pent-up demand for the services right here. Easy, as we talked about, easy. Don't fill that packet out. Don't go here, don't go there. So having said that, we embraced it. It rolled in. It's working wonderfully. But when we're there, we have a lot of folks who walk away from the process with their brand new concealed weapons application done. You're going to get your license in the mail in 2 to 3 weeks. And they say, okay, I've got it now. Where can I carry? What does it mean to carry? What does it mean to be concealed? We don't know those answers, and we don't want to start suggesting those answers. So we asked the Sheriff's Office to partner with us because they know those answers. We normally say, just go to, this is a cop-out, right? We normally say, go to the Department of Agriculture. They are the monitors. They are the rule holders. Go there and look at their website. And it's a pretty explicit, but we thought it would be better to have hands-on with our local sheriff so you could ask questions of him. So we're gonna start by introducing Richard Mulsick. And by the way, my card and Richard's are on the back table. So when you leave, if you think of something later and you wanna ask Richard, please just give him a call. If you want to ask a question on anything else our office does with you or for you, please call me, and I'm glad to help. And Richard was going to have a partner here helping. We have about 5 individuals who could do concealed weapon permitting, but we are so slammed in the office that we didn't dare take another person off the counter. So with that, Richard's going to carry the whole ball of wax. Richard Mulsick.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning. I'm going to just open with a little bit of a statement I put together here about the Florida Concealed Weapons Permit. First of all, in order to be eligible, you have to be 21 years of age. You have to provide a photo ID, driver's license, or a state-issued identification card. Be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident alien. You must be competent with a firearm by either providing a gun safety certificate, a DD-214 military honorably discharged release form, a hunter safety card, or a certificate from this or any other state, which refers back to the hunter safety, or be active duty military or active law enforcement. A concealed weapons permit from another state is not an acceptable form of proof, as the requirements for qualification vary state to state. So if you have a permit from another state, that is not an acceptable form of qualification to get your Florida concealed weapons permit. If you have the training certificate from another state and it is NRA approved, then that is an acceptable form of qualification. The Florida Concealed Weapons Permit is valid for 7 years, and it can be submitted at any participating Florida tax collector's office, the Division of Licensing's regional offices, or by mail. If you have an arrest record, you must also be able to provide proof through court documentation of final disposition of the charges. So you have to bring your paperwork with you to say, hey, I've taken care of this. Okay, that being said, I'm going to go into a little bit about what we do when we get a new applicant in the office and he's wanting to do a new application. The first thing we do is to ask to see his identification, his photo ID. So once that's done, we look at the documents that he is providing for the application to make sure that they are an acceptable form. We go over the basic explanation of the concealed weapons permit application. Once that's done, we scan the documents that he's provided, or he or she. We then take the fees for service. A photo is required. We have to take a photo in the office, of course, to be able to be printed onto the card itself. Fingerprints are also required. They are taken here in the office. They are scanned and transmitted to Tallahassee along with the application, except if the applicant is active duty law enforcement or retired 1 year or less. We then give a brief spiel as to what is required when you carry the concealed weapons permit, that you must carry the permit at all times when you're carrying your firearm, in addition to your driver's license or Florida ID. You must have another photo ID that coincides with the permit. We go over the time frame that you should expect when you're looking to get your permit. Most permits come in about 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 3 weeks. We also go over the fact that if you don't receive your permit in 30 days, that you need to contact the Division of Licensing so they can be aware that you haven't received it, and they can give you a status update. We tell the people about change of address, that if you change your address during the course of the next 7 years, you need to notify the Division of Licensing so that they can update their information, so that they don't send you out a renewal notice to an address that you may no longer be receiving your mail at. We go over the renewal procedures. We talk about the late fees that are involved, which if the permit expires even one day, they add a $15 late fee to the normal price of the renewal. If the permit goes 180 days or longer expired, then you basically have to start over again. You have to do the application over again, you have to be re-fingerprinted, and you have to pay the full price. So, you don't want that to happen to you if you can avoid it. Sometimes, especially with elderly applicants, the fingerprinting procedure doesn't go so well. Their fingerprints just aren't what they used to be when they were younger, and some of their fingerprints just aren't able to be processed or accepted. So we have to do re-fingerprinting on occasion. And then we just sit down at the end and we ask them if they have any questions. So that's basically the procedure for a new application. The renewal process is much quicker and much simpler. The biggest thing with the renewal procedure is that we must either have the actual permit or we have to have the renewal notice. If we don't have one or the other, then we cannot proceed, because we have to be able to get the license number off the permit card or the renewal document itself. You sit down, we make any changes that may be needed to the record, such as an address change or change in telephone number, so forth. We take your fee, we take a new photo, and we actually print the card here in the office. Takes about 10 or 15 minutes, and you're walking out the door with it. So it's very simple, very easy. That's basically it.
It's a pretty simple process, but stand for questions.
Sure.
Anybody have questions? Like, I don't know if you want to talk about the fee structure or
Well,
go ahead.
where do you pick up the application? To get started, and what do you have to do once you fill out an application? You have to take a
Such a
course?
great question. We did not stage her. And the answer is?
The application is actually done online here in the office. You sit down at one of our terminals and you will actually fill out the application online.
Okay, and your office is located where? Because I'm not that familiar where the tax department is, and,
Right over here on the other side of the building.
It's,
okay, I didn't know
you're
that.
familiar with the Department of Motor Vehicles side of our house. It's
Yeah.
actually still your tax collector office. But when we issue motor vehicle, we've contracted with the motor vehicle, so those representatives stand in the place of motor vehicle. So people call it the motor vehicle office. It's
Right.
actually your tax collector office that does motor vehicle services. It's on the opposite side of this building,
Okay,
312 Oak Street,
okay, thank you.
if I'm incorrect.
I didn't know
Yes.
where it was.
And so before we finish, all you do is bring in an ID that says, this is who I am, which shows that you're over 21,
Yeah.
and your documentation of your safety course, correct? And money.
Okay, that was my other question. If you don't have a safety course, excuse me, if you're coming from another state with a permit and you don't have a safety course, where do you go for a safety course?
Any
How do
of,
you get a safety course?
well, the sheriff's office offers it, I believe once a month.
We'll talk about that briefly.
Thank you.
But do let me add here that, and I don't, not to take away from the sheriff's
Yeah,
office, because
there's
they
a
do
lot
an
of people
awesome
that do.
job. We have
Yeah.
3 or 4 private entities also in the county that do, and we have one of the instructors here, he's an NRA instructor, Jimmy Taylor, he left his cards for that purpose, but there's actually other people as well. So, and,
So safety course first, and then application.
yes.
Okay, that's my
And
question.
then come visit us.
Yes.
No application. But so just let me add one thing. Where are you, whatever state you were in when you got your carry, if your course was an NRA endorsed course,
Yeah,
And you have that paperwork.
Yes, I understand.
That should work here.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
These addresses on the back office locations, I'm in Interlochen, can I go to Interlochen to fill it out?
No, ma'am.
You have to come here.
You have to come here. It's a good point. We put that on the back of all of our brochures, that because there's two functions that only happen in specific places. Department of Health contracted with our satellites, so you can't do that with us here. You can only do it in the satellites. And concealed weapons, when it first rolled out, only allowed one per county,
Oh, okay.
because they really wanted to get them in every county first, as soon as they could, and that's a huge rollout process. The Department of Ag actually paid for all the equipment. It didn't cost us anything to bring the service in. So they only allowed one per county. Now they're allowing a second per county, but quite honestly, our numbers at our two satellites don't qualify to have them there for the cost associated with it. So I doubt we'll see that anytime in the near future. But a good question, and I hesitate to take all of our offices off the back of those brochures, but thank you for asking. John?
Yeah, my son,
Oh, I'm sorry, did you want to add?
I was just gonna say, this is a blank application, Linda, that I was just gonna pass around just to show them what they, basically what they fill out, the courses that are involved.
Super, thank you.
Yeah, you can just.
my son is not in law enforcement, but graduated from the law
Richard needs
enforcement
to listen to
academy.
this, because I'm not going to know the answer.
Okay. My son graduated from the law enforcement academy, is not in law enforcement presently, but he did graduate. Does that qualify for familiarization, or does he still need to take the course?
Well, does he have any training certificate that's
He's
associated
got a
with that?
graduation certificate.
I don't know. I really don't know how to answer you
I
that.
can answer that question, because that actually came up in the past. Yes, that would qualify him, as would anyone who served in the military, who can produce a DD 214, which we interviewed just a few moments ago. If he brings in that certification issued by the state from criminal justice standards, he will qualify for that military.
So, because he was gonna take the course, so he doesn't have to.
Service there, WD,
How much is it?
For a new
they just
application,
said something about that, I can't have
If you
that.
don't mind, we'd rather have you at the table.
What'd you say, 119?
yes, ma'am.
119.
How about renewal?
Renewals, if there's no late fee involved, as it currently stands, are $57. And they're good for the same 7 years.
And before we leave that, law enforcement or retired military, is it a different fee?
It is,
So it gets a little
slightly,
trickier if you have a specific question like that.
slightly different, and I have a fee
I
schedule
believe
here.
it's the lack of having to do fingerprints.
Right, law enforcement, officers retired 1 year or less.
Or current, of course.
For renewals is, looks like it's gonna be $42. So you save, what, $15?
And it's the price of the fingerprinting. We don't re-fingerprint in that respect. Did you have a question, Sharon? I heard a deep sigh. So, yes, ma'am, Ms. Clevenger.
My husband and I took the course like over a year ago. I read that it doesn't expire, so we can just bring our paperwork that we did the sheriff's course. So that is still all good, we can bring it to the courthouse and,
Absolutely.
Not the courthouse.
I mean,
Our office,
yes, your,
312
the
Oak
tax
Street.
office, yes, sorry.
And I'm going to tell you this, Richard's booth is booth 0, because we have booth 1 through 10, and then all of a sudden we needed to do concealed weapons, and he's like at the front, so we didn't want to make him 11. So when they tell you go to booth 0, we have a big 0, and it doesn't say anything about it's not his personnel. It's just the way
Well, I
the
think it
booths
actually
are.
works out good, because the law enforcement code for an armed person is signal 0.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't that cool?
yeah, so that's, we'll just add the word signal in front of it.
Cooperation.
Yeah.
Cooperation. Yes, Mr. Clevenger.
If we cannot find that paper, we have to take it over again.
Yes, sir. unless-
We're not for sure where we put all our
Yeah.
paperwork.
Let me just tell you this briefly. If you cannot find that certification, if you will come to the sheriff's office, and we can search back through our records, we can actually print a duplicate
Oh,
certificate.
okay,
Oh,
very good. You shouldn't have told him that though, because now he's not gonna
Wait, sorry.
start.
Yes,
I
sir.
will add one
Bruce?
thing, if you took it privately, not through the sheriff's office, through an area instructor, and they've lost their credentials, they will deny your application.
They will?
if that instructor's not pulled for some reason?
Is not what for
If
some
they,
reason?
if their certification's been pulled from the NRA, they
Ah.
will drop it. You will
If
not-
your instructor
Yeah,
is
it's
no
not
longer
certified.
associated with,
Usually it has to be pulled for a reason.
yes, I just wanted to clarify, it's not just, it's that instructor is no longer associated. Sarge, question?
Okay. Yes, I was trying to find out how often those classes are offered at the sheriff's office.
We offer them once a month on the third Saturday of every month, and I'll talk about that more briefly in just a moment.
And he's gonna be up in just a second, we're just gonna answer more questions or answer questions about the process itself. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, I got in on the tail end of it. I'm fire deputy for St. Johns County as well as JSO. What was the fee on that for the new licensing, sir?
And how long have you been
It's
retired?
been years.
It's been what?
It's been years.
Okay, so that may not be the same. So
Yeah,
you've been retired more than 1 year.
Yes, oh yes.
So that might put you back into the normal citizen route.
right, I think he's gonna have to pay the full price, which is $119. Yes, sir. Did you retire? Well, you didn't actually retire.
Well, we
It's
can-
different if you retire.
We can specifically look into that question for you, and if you'll take Richard's card, or stay after, we'll make sure we look it up specifically to you, because we don't want to give you incorrect information on that. Mr. Taylor?
I have a suggestion. Whenever you do get your permit, take a good, clear picture of it and put it with your paperwork. That way, if your permit gets destroyed or lost, you've got a copy of it you can bring down, and they'll have all the information they need on it.
You'll have that number is what you're saying, you'll have the license
Yeah.
number, which is key. Now, that's coming next. Okay, that's coming next. What we're talking about now really involves these two brochures that make sure you walk off of them. This we just got timely from the Ag Department, so we just put our personal data on it because we'd rather you come to us than go to them. And this is our normal brochure. We were here just talking, Richard, about the process of getting your permit. And any other questions on that process? And if you have some later, please feel free, we'll all be here. I do want to say one thing, and I don't think we're going to need any support on this, I think it's going to go through, but it appears that by next year, all of the tax offices issuing CWPs, concealed carry permits, will actually be able to issue your original at the offices. You will be able to walk off with it. And you're good. What about background checks? Well, it's actually going to be approved unless rejected. So the percentage approved is so high. They want to get out of the business of even printing these licenses. So it'll go to your tax collector offices as well. And then if for some reason the background check shows a problem, it will be pulled. But the pulling is going to cost the Ag Department a lot less than them issuing the hundreds of thousands every year that they know work out, because the pulling, the ones that are rejected are very minimal. It's less than 1%. So that's coming next year. We anticipate it rolling out. Again, they will be rolling this out over time. I see a question? No. It's like, really? So with that, I do want to, so we needed to partner with our sheriff's office because they are our local law enforcement. They can help answer the other sides of the questions, which is, I have my permit. Now what? So I would like to introduce our sheriff, Sheriff Gator Deloach, to please join us with your information.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Myers. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I'm thankful to see that we have so many residents here that are interested in, if you don't already have your concealed weapons permit, getting some information about the permitting process. And before we go into that, I just want to say that this room has special memories to me. Much before I was born even, my great-grandfather, Wallace Folsom, actually opened a barber shop here, which was later assumed by Jerry Maddox, who actually gave me a number of haircuts as a young boy. So this brings back a ton of memories from my childhood years ago, as I'm sure some of you can relate to as well. Before we go into too many questions about the permitting process, I just want to cover a little bit about what Mrs. Myers and Richard spoke about earlier, specifically the permitting process and how it's been streamlined thanks to the efforts of Mrs. Myers partnering with the Sheriff's Office and the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Previously, whenever many of you and I got my concealed weapons permit years ago, there was a lengthy application process, and it required you to go to your local law enforcement agency who may or may not charge you to get your fingerprints done. Coincidentally, we did not charge for that. That's all done in-house now here, of course. But you would have to go get your fingerprints done, and you would then have to go to Walgreens or CVS and take a passport photograph, and then attach that to your application, and then mail that in. As Ms. Myers said, that application process could take anywhere from 90 to 120 days, or sometimes even longer. And then as things began to transition, Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services saw a need, so they opened a regional office in Jacksonville, which further expedited the process and probably shortened the return time to around 60 to 75 days, which was an improvement, but certainly not where it needed to be. And through Mrs. Myers' efforts, partnering with the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, as she spoke to earlier, and thanks to Richard's efforts as well, that turnaround time, I have actually gotten anecdotal accounts of people getting their permits back in as little as 3 to 5 days from the date of submission. Generally, that takes between 2 and 3 weeks, but it's a substantial improvement over what it was. And I want to personally thank Mrs. Myers for actively getting engaged with the department and making this available to residents in Putnam County. So I want to direct your attention first to this document that hopefully you all have in front of you. If anyone does not have a copy of this document, please raise your hand and we'll make sure that you get one. This is a quick reference guide to concealed carry in Florida that we've created at the Sheriff's Office. And what we've done is just take some bits and pieces and excerpts from Florida Statutes Chapter 790, which covers concealed carry of firearms. This is basically a quick glance, Reader's Digest version, condensed from the statute. Any of you who have applied for a permit previously, I'm not sure, Richard, with electronic copies, do they still get a copy of Chapter 790 supplied with it?
No, sir, we don't
Okay.
supply anything like that.
Previously, whenever you would submit a paper application, Chapter 790, which governs concealed carry, would always be included with the packets. And if any of you have read it, you might as well be trying to interpret Chinese hieroglyphics. It's very complex and protracted, and it's a difficult read to say the least, unless you have a law degree, and some of them even struggle with it. So, yes, as the legislature intended, I'm sure. So this is basically like I said, a very condensed version of the statutes that has the essential information. We've laminated these, so feel free to do with them as you please. Share them with friends, post them on your refrigerator as a reminder so that you can refresh yourself as time permits. And I want to talk about a little bit about responsibility. I have a great deal of respect for firearms and the power of them. I also have a great deal of respect for things that can hurt me. Electricity, water, fire. So I treat them with the utmost respect. And we owe that to ourselves to treat firearms with respect as well, because a gun itself isn't inherently dangerous. A gun in the hands of someone who is irresponsible is incredibly dangerous. What we have found, though, is that individuals who apply for and receive a concealed weapons permit are, without a doubt, in my humble opinion, the most responsible gun owners that there are. So, not to belabor that too much, I want to talk just a little bit about, and we'll go through this, we'll just use this guide to concealed carry as a short outline. And I'm not going to go through all of this verbatim, but we'll go over some of the basic information. And this is, again, directly from Chapter 790 in Florida statutes. You cannot carry a concealed firearm into any law enforcement office or station, a jail or prison for obvious reasons, a courthouse, a polling place, any meeting of a governing body, a school, college, or professional athletic event, a school, a career center, a bar, But there is something that I want to go over with here, specifically with regard to bars. And the difference is, if that occupation's primary business is the sale and consumption of alcohol, you flatly cannot carry it in there. It's just not allowed under Florida statutes. However, if you go into a restaurant whose primary purpose is to serve food, and it also happens that they serve alcohol, you are certainly more than welcome and allowed within the confines of the statute to carry your firearm into a restaurant, even though they serve alcohol, as long as that's not their primary business. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any college or university, an airport, a federal building or office, or in a manner visible to the public. And I want to talk briefly about that. There has long since been a debate, for as long as I can remember, about accidental exposure of firearms that we carry on our person. And there's actually a bill before the House right now. I believe it's, don't quote me, but I believe it's House Bill 29 that actually addresses accidental exposure of a firearm. And this would cover someone, for example, who goes into the grocery store and you're carrying your firearm in a responsible manner, in a secure holster, concealed on in your waistband, and you reach up on that top shelf to pick up whatever that item is. Your firearm is briefly exposed, and someone says, "Gun!" And of course, it causes panic. People are not accustomed to seeing people carrying firearms openly. If this bill passes, and I expect that it will this year, it carves out an exemption in the statute in Chapter 790, which would make it okay if you accidentally expose your firearm for a brief period of time or in a non-threatening manner. Where it will not cover you is if you pull out your firearm carelessly and expose it, or pull it out in the grocery store because someone makes you mad and wave it around in their face and threaten a bunch of people. Obviously, there's no exemption for that. Listen, I'd like to make this as interactive as I can, so as we're going through these topics, I'm trying to move through this pretty quickly because of the funeral that I've unfortunately got to attend. So if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me, and I'll be happy to take your questions then. Yes, ma'am.
What about churches?
Churches are absolutely, and I encourage you to carry your firearm to church with you. Those are one of the places that there's no provision in the statute to prevent you from carrying your firearm into a place of worship. I can tell you that anytime I attend church, I personally carry a concealed firearm, and I'll take that a step further. I carry a concealed firearm with me everywhere that I go. And I would ask that each of you as responsible firearm owners do the same to protect yourself and to protect those around you.
As a law enforcement officer, though, you're exempt from that do not carry into.
Locations.
Yes.
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 Except maybe next.
Well, with the exception of airports, unless we're on official business.
Right.
And I can tell you that they don't give a flip who I am when I go to a federal court.